Well, actually, before we get to people's colons, let's King Jerry Lawler, once again, by the way, the Teflon King. He's nipping up from what we hear. On the drive-thru, we were recording 3 days ago or whatever it was, and you saw that on Twitter come up that Lawler had suffered a stroke down in Florida where he has a condo, and I think had just done an appearance. And we didn't know anything about it at the time. We said, oh, hopefully this is not serious, whatever. Well, in that intervening time, while I was otherwise occupied, the first story out was, oh, God, it was really serious. But then as calmer heads prevailed and everybody got a firmer grip of the situation, obviously it's always serious when you have a stroke and are incapacitated and taken to the hospital. But he's already, as I said, the Teflon King. He's already conscious. He's been released from the hospital, I believe, this morning as we speak now, to do, he's going to stay in his condo in Florida and do some type of outpatient rehab. He's not cleared to fly yet, but he was already on the phone and FaceTiming with certain people, a day after it happened. So, thankfully everything's okay, but he's still got some rehab to do, and he can only, speak a few words at a time without being out of breath or whatever the case. But so that crisis came and hopefully has gone pretty much over a couple of day period of time. But I spoke to somebody that had spoken to people in the inner circle that talked to him directly, and so far everything's looking positive. But
and in fact, he'll be working next month against Bill Dundee in Biloxi, Mississippi.
Quit. Wait a minute, did you say Biloxi?
I picked the wrong side of the state. That's right.
Picked the wrong side of the state.
In Tupelo, Mississippi.
If you'd have said Boonville instead of Biloxi, you'd have been.
No one would have gotten that. No one would have said
that.
Oh,
I'm telling you.
Only you.
But anyway, so again, a heart attack and a stroke and all this stuff. Lawler he's amazing. He nips up from this shit. But I'm hoping that he might, if he does, I guess at this point, Lawler can have a match now. He could still wrestle and never fall down and nobody would even notice. So as long as somebody else is actually taking bumps, he can have a match and you would never notice it if he didn't fall down or practically even be harmed in any way. He can still get by with it. He's unique in that, but I hope he slows down on his schedule.
Do you think he'll have another match?
It depends on what his doctors say after he gets over this, because the WWE wouldn't clear him. I mean, the physical examination that they give and have these guys undertake and the tests they do and the blood work and all that stuff is comparable to like a NASA astronaut. And since he actually legally died on their air live, I can see why they wouldn't clear him. But he's been to plenty of doctors in between then and now and has not been ordered to cease and desist. So, and he gets by with it. And I mean, he died of a heart attack temporarily 10 years ago, and he's wrestled every year since then. So, it depends on what the doctor or doctors tell him and how he feels after this. And yeah, once again, it's not like he's catching somebody that's doing a dive on him or he's taking his big high backdrop anymore or whatever the case. I think I saw him 3 years ago. He still threw a one drop kick just to prove he could do it. But a heck of a string if this is the end of it. If he even doesn't wrestle in 2020, well, he's already made 2023, so he'd have to be out for another year and 11 months to miss his string of once a year or at least every year for 53 years. Next year would be 54. And we were talking about this on the drive-thru also. it was and it's not, we don't know if it's a record. It's an interesting factoid. Nobody has researched this particular topic to find out, but we can't think of a better example that somebody recently put up on the internet. Jerry Lawler wrestled Lou Thez. Lou Thez started wrestling in 1935. Lawler still wrestles today. This was last week before the stroke. So that's 88 years. Is that the longest, stretch of wrestling history between two individuals? And I don't even know what kind of record you would call that, or how you name it, or even explain it very easily. And I said, I bet when Lawler started and he was working around Memphis before they saw something in him and sent him to Alabama, he probably at some point crossed paths with Herb Welch, because Herb Welch was promoting Dyersburg and Jackson and Blytheville, Arkansas, and those West Tennessee area towns. And he would still work, even he was in his early 60s at that point. So anyway, somebody sent me the information that Lawler was in a 7-man battle royal in Jackson, Tennessee on January 12th, 1972, and that battle royal was won by Herb Welch. So, and by the way, at the time, Herb Welch was a much bigger name in Jackson, Tennessee wrestling than Jerry Lawler was before anybody said, the promoter put himself over. He was still putting himself over, but he could stretch everybody else in the fucking match. And that's when he was, he was training guys like David Schultz and etc. So anyway, Herb at that point was about 64. Because he was.
I actually didn't realize he was still wrestling when he was training guys.
Oh yeah, well, I think you see on some of those, like the old Blytheville, Arkansas wrestling ads from 72 and 73, and that used to be on Twitter a lot. And as a matter of fact, Seth Hansen, who passed away here a while back, he used to put a lot of them up. But that was before Eddie Marlin or Buddy Wayne, one or the other, took it over. But it was Herb Welch's town, and he had a card there at the American Legion Arena of 2 matches. And it would be an opening match. It would be 2 out of 3 falls. And then a tag team match would be 2 out of 3 falls. And that show would run between an hour and a half and 2 hours. And it was the local fans that he had built up. And I mean, it was in the hundreds. If not, you could draw 1,000 people there, because it was top guys off of Memphis television when Memphis TV was hot. You'd just get a main event, a preliminary. And a lot of times Herb would still work on some of those shows or over in Jackson because of the name he had been in that territory for 30 years. And the tickets in Blytheville would be 75 cents general admission, $1.25 ringside. And if they did $1,000, then they only had 6 guys and a referee on the card. So the building Herb probably got for $50, and the guys would make $75, and they'd be close to Memphis after TV. And $75 50 years ago would be what now? About $300. And Herb Welch should go home down the road with, a couple $100, which today would be nearly $1,000. But nevertheless, the point is, as to pertains to this exercise, Roy Welch, we know, was wrestling in Texas already in 1930, and probably the Welch clan was from Oklahoma. He was probably broken in and trained a bit before that. He was, I think, 6 or 7 years older than Herb. So Roy Welch definitely started wrestling at least 5 or 6 years before Lou Thez. Herb came later, but Roy was already in. So did Herb start before 1935? Haven't been able to determine that yet. He would have been at that point in his late 20s. So chances are he probably had. But in that case, we've probably stretched this over 90 years. And then if you increase it to talk about guys that either Lou Thez or Herb Welch would have worked out with, then you're getting guys that go back to the 1800s. You know, Roy Welch was partially trained by Cal Farley and the original Dutch Mantell in Texas, who had been wrestling at that time since the 1900s. And Thez did gym workouts with the George Tragoses and those guys who, it's very possible that either one of them worked out with a guy who had been a professional wrestler by that description in the 1800s.
I always like those games where you can kind of trace things back. I guess it's the 7 Degrees of Kevin Bacon or whatever it was years ago when it took off.
Actually, you're supposed to cook bacon at least 350 degrees, but I see what you're going for there.
Like, if you wanted to figure out is there anyone still wrestling? No, I guess not. I answered my own question. I was going to say, is there anyone still wrestling today that would have worked with Verne Gagne? And I can't, unless it's someone from Japan, I can't think of anyone.
Well, hold on. Verne, it worked until 1981. And then did he not, who was his comeback against?
Bockwinkel.
No, who was it? He did another comeback in a tag team thing. Greg in 84-ish.
Bruiser Brody and Jerry Blackwell, was it? Or it was Bruiser Brody and someone. I think it was Bruiser Brody, Adnan El Casey. So Adnan El Casey. There we go.
Adnan Casey's still alive, and Adnan Casey he was high level amateur for was he from Iran or Iraq? I forget.
I think it was Iraq, and I think actually you hit me with something in a Guess Your Program a while ago that we traced him back, I think at least to the late 50s, right?
Yes. He was already wrestling in the late 50s. He's still alive. He would have worked with Verne. I bet there's more. Well, Greg is still alive. He worked with Verne as tag team partners. But Verne then would go back to, you said when we were talking about this earlier, he'd go back to Joe Stecker.
Yeah.
But, now did Verne was that Verne's first?
I don't know if he worked with him.
No, he didn't work with him. Now we're talking about who worked with somebody in the ring. Verne worked for him.
Yeah.
But who, Abe Cashy, King Kong Cashy, was Verne's first opponent in his first pro match because he was a trusted veteran that they wanted to shine Verne up and put him over big. And he had been that was 1949. He'd been in the business for at least 20 years. So.
All right, let's look at Flair, because you know Flair's career pretty good. Who, at any point in Flair's career, and I guess it probably would have been within the first 15 years, who did he wrestle that would have gone back the furthest in wrestling? I mean, he wrestled Buddy Rogers in 79, but I don't know if Buddy Rogers would have went back further than maybe someone Flair wrestled in 73.
George Becker. When did George Becker retire in the Carolinas? It was before Flair came in, was it not?
It was either right before or, right around the same time, so I think it was before.
He was working in the late 30s, but he doesn't apply because he quit beforehand. Did Flair ever work with Bull Curry in some kind of crazy Toronto situation?
I wouldn't think so, only because
probably not.
Bull Curry would have only been in Toronto, I believe, I could be wrong. The last chance would have been when the Sheik was working with Toronto. Flair would have come in with Mid-Atlantic.
Did Sweet Daddy Siki work preliminaries in the Carolinas in the 70s?
I'm not sure. See, you're going to the Carolinas. I was actually thinking when Flair broke in Minneapolis. Who did he work with?
Well, but he wasn't there long and only worked with underneath guys. And the underneath guys, they weren't still using the underneath guys when they were 60. And still, even then at that point in time, the early 70s AWA, they didn't keep a big roster. And there was, Crusher started in 49. So did Byrne. Stevens was early 50s. So was Bockwinkel. So I think Flair may have crossed paths with Johnny Heidemann. in the Carolinas. He was a rookie in the World War II years, probably. So he would probably have run into older wrestlers as he went to the Carolinas during that transition. Because one thing about the guys on top in the Carolinas, once they got on top, they stayed there forever. The baby faces mostly, and they were over, and you couldn't blast them out with dynamite. But that's why it ended up, George Becker was wrestling when he was fucking 60. But they needed a renovation, Brian, of talent. They needed new-looking, modern-looking, space-age talent. That's what you need in everything. You need a new look. You need a paint-up, a clean-up, a fix-up. You know what I'm talking about, don't you?
Well, maybe not in general, but certainly when I go maybe to the bathroom and I look at the shower, I'm like, I wish we did this better.
Well, every time I go to the bathroom, I realize I need to repaint the walls. But, folks, I'll tell you, if you're like Brian and you're uncomfortable every time you go to take a dump, because you just
I didn't say that.
Well, you're sitting there taking a dump and you're looking around saying, I live in a dump. Let's face it.
I didn't say that either.
What's one of the first rooms of the house that gets crotch rot? The bathroom. It's got all the places where things can grow and multiply and fester and stew and bubble and squeak until finally it looks like a creep show episode gone wild where your whole shower has hair and green mildew and fungus growing from it, and it's an entire science project. And the grout, the grout is gratin. That's a combination of rotten and grout, gratin. The grout is gratin because it's got all that stuff growing in it also, and every time you put your kids in the bathtub or the shower to clean them off, something attaches itself to their skin, and they begin acting strangely. It changes their whole personality. Folks, don't let these things happen to you.
Certainly not.
No, remodel your bathroom with our friends at West Shore Home, who are the fastest growing shower and bath remodeling company in the United States of by gum America. They fully replace, and you've seen the TV commercials. If you haven't, you're living under a rock. They fully replace your old shower or bathtub with the modern showers or baths in just one day. Just what they start early in the morning. Now, if your cock is out there crowing, that means they're already at work. They're going to roust you up out of bed about 3:30, and they're going to bring in some drills and some hammers, and they're going to go to whacking.
No. Let's not. Let's move past all of that, Jim. Let's renovate this ad. Let's renovate this spot right here, and let's talk about the fine things that the fine people at West Shore Home will do to your fine home.
Well, yeah, they'll do something to your fine home, all right. No, they'll come when you want them to. If you're not a farmer and you don't get up early with the roosters and the chickens and the pigs and the donkeys and the cats and the dogs and all the other things, they'll come at 9 o'clock. If you're just a boring old white meat baby face, they'll come at 9 o'clock in the morning, but they'll start right then and they will apply themselves fully. And by dinner time that night, so that you can invite them all around your dinner table to share a fine repast in celebration of their excellent work, if you so desire.
That is not required.
It's not required, but boy, what a rude prick you are if you don't. Just eat right in front of them when they're starving and sweating. You've done nothing all day. You don't have to lift a finger.
You wouldn't be rude at all. You would just be doing things the way they're supposed to be done, and it is not on you to feed the wonderful people from West Shore Home.
Well, it's the legal burden is not on you, I suppose, but I would think a moral obligation. These people have slaved for you all day to get this ready in just one day before dinner, so you could have all the kids and the neighbors come in and say, hey, look at my brand new shitter. But no, they're sweating. They're heaving all over themselves to get this done while you're sitting back not lifting a finger all day. It takes more effort to take the dog out for a walk, and then you're not going to feed them. Well, that's up to you, but they don't expect it, but it sure would be nice. Nevertheless, they're going to take out the old shower or bath. They're going to install the new one. They do all the cleanup. Boom, it's done. And the way they're able to do this, folks, is because with their design consultants coming over to your house early, most of the time while you're not around. That way they can get a good look around at everything.
That's not what they do, and you know that's not what they do. Well, and everyone should know that they have no expectation of people looking into your house when you're sleeping.
That's why, no, not while you're sleeping. You don't need to be there at all. Just walk out of your home and leave the door standing open, and they'll come over while you're gone. They'll look around at everything so they don't bother you. You're not even there at the time.
The people at West Shore Home are so reputable that they would never even agree to that. They want you there. They want to make sure you are supervising them until you decide to go watch TV or something.
All right, well, I'll agree with you there. They do want you there so they can get a good eyeball of
Stop
you.
it. No.
And find out whether or not you're the kind of people they want to be doing business with.
They want to do business with the kind of people that listen to the Jim Cornette Experience.
Well, why would you want those people in your fucking life? There's got to be something wrong with them. But the design consultants who come over at some point will show you all this stuff and give you all the options, and then you build it yourself. The laser-etched designs, the built-in seats, the shelves, the doors, the windows, the magnetic shower heads. Holy my, I wonder if they do bidets. I don't see bidets.
You asked about that the other day. Are you into bidets?
Well, I'm apparently not. I can't find anybody to do one. But anyway, folks, you need to call West Shore Home and or check out promo.westshorehome.com/Jim. And if that's too long for you, just remember promo.westshorehome.com/Jim. See, that's shorter. Happiness is just a phone call away, or just westshorehome.com. You're going to get the fastest, easiest, and most convenient home remodeling experience that you will ever have in your life. And I can't wait to get them out here this year for all the things, because they do doors.
Are you rubbing your hands together?
I'm rubbing my hands together in anticipation. Hear that? Because they do. You can find out if you check the website, westshorehome.com, if you can request their free window and door remodeling preview in your location. And speaking of locations.
Here we go.
If you live in or around Louisville, Lexington, Cincinnati, Indianapolis, Pittsburgh, Harrisburg, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Richmond, Salisbury, Virginia Beach, Winston-Salem, Charlotte, Greenville, Asheville, Knoxville, Chattanooga, Charleston, Wilmington, Myrtle Beach, Greenville, New Bern, Columbia, Atlanta, Jacksonville, Orlando, Ocala, Tampa, Birmingham, Huntsville, Montgomery, Oklahoma City, Houston, Dallas, Austin, San Antonio, Phoenix, Denver, Colorado Springs, and Salt Lake motherfucking City. Check them out, baby. West Shore Home.